Thank you very much, Randy. And let's go right back to our phone callers. We'll talk next to Tim. He's listening in Mount Vernon, Texas. Hi, Tim.
Hey, Hank. Good to talk to you. I appreciate you taking my call.
You're welcome.
What I was calling about, I was in a Bible study a while back in talking about the Book of Esther and how the Book of Esther was a story as opposed to actual events that occurred in history. You know, that these events didn't take place, that this was a story to relay a message to us. And you were talking about how we shouldn't necessarily take things literally in the Bible, but listen to what they're telling us and what they have to say. And would you say a lot of the Bible is that way, or is most of it, you know, very literal? And I'm thinking of things like the story of the flood and other kind of supernatural type things that you kind of catch my drift, I think.
Well, first of all, I think it's very, very important that you understand that I do take the Bible literally. But what does that mean? That means that you read it as literature, and thus if the Bible is using a simile or an extended metaphor, or it is using historical poetry, we do violence to the text not to take that into consideration. So if Jesus Christ is called the Lion of the tribe of Judah, we know immediately that this is saying something about what Jesus Christ is like. It's not talking about what Jesus looks like. If we read the book of Genesis and we hear that God walks with Adam and Eve in the cool of the day, we immediately assume that this is an anthropomorphism. This is a heavenly condescension for the purposes of our understanding. God doesn't have big feet. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. So again, to take the Bible literally, as I do, means that you read it as literature. The problem that I'm pointing out is that there are a lot of people that come to the Bible. I think of 𝘍𝘓, the science guy, and he reads in the Bible that God puts two great lights in the sky. And because he's a fundamentalist from the left, he immediately discounts the Bible. Bible can't be true. It's found faulty in its first few pages. Obviously, God didn't put two great lights in the sky. He only put one great light in the sky, the sun. The moon only reflects light. It doesn't produce light, and therefore the Bible is ruled out of court as being faulty and full of error. Well, this is just nonsense, because when we talk about kissing our wife in the moonlight, I mean, nobody starts complaining and saying to us, well, you know, there's no such thing as moonlight. Or if I say the sun rose today at 7:14, if I say that, no one's going to jump all over me and say, you know what, you just don't know what you're talking about. You're still back in the dark ages. You believe in geocentrism. The world now knows that geocentrism is faulty, and everybody who has got a modicum of sense believes in heliocentrism. Again, we recognize that that is phenomenological language. So that's what I mean when I say I take the Bible literally. Now, getting directly to your question with respect to Esther, Esther is very clearly a historical narrative. It takes place at a time in which Cyrus, king of Persia, had defeated the Babylonian Empire. And it was now the early 5th century, and Xerxes is on the throne. And the first return of the Babylonian captives, led by Zerubbabel, occurred, and most Jews remained in Persia, and several more decades would go by before a second wave occurred under Ezra, and then that would be followed by a third under Nehemiah. So the events recorded in the book of Esther, as well as Esther's reign in Persia, occur at a particular time in history. So we read this self-evidently as a historical narrative that takes place in a particular city, in a royal city, in the Persian Empire. Everything points to the fact that this needs to be understood as a historical narrative. And to not take it as a historical narrative would be faulty. In fact, we can learn a lot from this historical narrative because the world looks on and sees Esther raised up as a way to save the Jews from certain destruction under Haman. And the text actually tells us on that day many people from many different nations became Jews, which meant that they were brought into all the types and shadows, ultimately pointing forward to Jesus Christ. So it's a historical narrative. It's poignant. It's profound. It has a great deal to teach us. So to render this as an apocryphal story simply doesn't fit with everything that you find in terms of the historical detail and underpinning of the Book of Esther. So the Bible certainly contains a historical narrative, and this is a historical narrative. There are also historical narratives that are interlaced with Jewish poetry and rife with metaphor and symbol. But of course, that does not in any way diminish the fact that it is a historical narrative. You know, the problem today is that we do a lot of things well. Reading and writing we do fairly well, but we don't do literature so well. So few people, I mean, if you listen to modern scientists like Bill Nye, it comes to mind again. I mean, I listen to him talk about the Bible and I think, wow, how is it possible that an educated person in the 21st century can be so benighted when it comes to literature in general, having no mental acumen for this? It just seems incredible. And how, well, I mean, I know he was a star on Dancing with the Stars, and so he's, quite nimble on his feet, but mentally he should be more nimble, especially when he calls himself the science guy. But I see the same problem in the Christian community. I see people who represent Jesus Christ, and they have no sense of reading the Bible, and the mistakes they make in terms of biblical interpretation end up dragging Christ's name through the mud. Someone was asking me about the Nephilim, whether or not these might be some hybrid between angelic beings and humans, because from their perspective, reading the text seemed pretty clear that fallen angels had gone in and had sex with women. Well, the moment you make that kind of conjecture, you end up with all kinds of problems. Some of the problems drawn to their logical conclusion would actually void epistemic warrant for the central event in Christianity, which is the resurrection. And to give Satan creative power is an abomination in and of itself. So there are attendant problems if we don't know how to read the Bible for all its worth and mine it for all its wealth. And this is one of the passions that I have, to teach people the art and science of biblical interpretation, which is a science in that rules apply, and an art in that the more we apply the rules, the better we get at it.